In this episode, we meet Jeffrey Lewis, the man once referred to as the best lyricist working in America. And who am I to disagree with Jarvis Cocker? We delve into Jeffrey's creative process as he makes music and comics, and he also discusses how Daniel Johnston altered the course of his life. I'm Jerry O'Dwyer, and this is How Are Things. I'm a glossy package on the market shelf. Come here, how have you been? Let's say is it a frustrating time for you at the moment?
You got that recording device working before I start pouring my heart out? I'm feeling quite, maybe you would say, maybe existential is the right description. I don't know. I keep asking myself, is this really any different from normal life? I mean, normal life contains more illusions and distractions in the sense that, maybe if I go to a restaurant, that will make me happy or something. You know, normal life contains more carrots that are 2 feet in front of your face that when you get there, you're still the same person. You still have as much work to do. You still are, just as satisfied or dissatisfied with your part in human existence. Right. But now we just have less of those carrots. We only have ourselves to face, our own emotions, our own relationships to our friends and our family and our work. What is challenged for me currently is just so the social limitation, the claustrophobia, shall we say, the claustrophobia of being helpless about decisions to I can't go see a gig, I can't go play a gig, I would be on tour right now if this wasn't happening.
Whereabouts were you meant to be?
Southeastern USA tour. So the tour was down the East Coast into Florida, back up through New Orleans, and then back across through Alabama and back up to New York City. I have most of it rescheduled for October. Anyway, I'm just, to answer your question, I'm just doing pretty much what I've always done. I have stuff I want to work on, and I'm working on it. I was very lucky that my band's tour in Europe wrapped up. We got home on March 8th. We got home just in time, and then everything shut down.
Well, ask you, are you working a lot on your artwork, your comics, or are you doing some songwriting? Like, for example, do you have a good routine, or are you a bit sporadic?
Usually, I don't have a very good routine. This situation has kind of inspired me to create more of a routine, which is the days when I follow the routine, I'm very happy. It's a really weird, I'm realizing weird psychological profile stuff about myself that I didn't have to come face to face with previously, but it's amazing how happy I am when I just follow my daily routine, and how grumpy and less happy I am when anything disrupts the routine. And what is my daily routine? Well, I've made this little list. Topic number 4, sketchbook. I'm always trying to work in my sketchbook, which is kind of like, for an artist, that's sort of like practicing your scales on piano. For any comic book nerds out there, this is my recreation of a very famous, historically important comic book cover, which I'll leave it to the esoteric nerds out there to shout out, I know what it is. Songwriting is task number 5.
Do you find songwriting a completely different animal? Whereas if you sit down in front of your sketchbook, you got the skills and the chops to complete what you want to have in mind. Does songwriting sometimes, does it happen, or sometimes does it not happen? It's like, was it Hemingway said the white page is almost like the white bull. It's kind of intimidating. How do you start, or how does it come to you?
Oh, absolutely. It's, that white page is the challenge of my life. That is the windmill that I'm tilting my lance at, although I've never read Don Quixote, but it's an arbitrary challenge because I could be a farmer, I could be a doctor, you pick something at some point in your life, and you just start to gain some mastery over it, and it becomes how you make your living for some weird reason, whatever it is. And for me, that is the blank page. And whether that's a blank page in the sketchbook or a blank page in my songwriting notebook, it's much harder in some ways, to attack the blank page of the songwriting notebook, because right now there's nothing there. The sketchbook, those are all pencil sketches that already exist, and all I got to do is ink them. So it's very pleasant. I can put on records while I'm working, and it's kind of like, it's just going on autopilot. It's just fun. Mm-hmm. The songwriting is more like, you got to sweat it out. Like with anything, the inspiration comes from doing it. If you sit around and wait for inspiration, that's a lot less likely to happen. But when you're doing it, that's when you start to inspire yourself, and you kind of build yourself a little ladder.
Yeah. You ever do that free writing trick where you is not to let your pen stop? So don't stop to peep around the corner. Just keep writing. Just splurge it all out. Your pen has to keep moving until the page is full. And it's complete waffle that comes out, but you'd be surprised. Lots of your songs as well. They're very self-depreciating, hugely funny, and very honest. But there's a lovely naive quality to the actual audio. And I know you've had a relationship with Daniel Johnston. I don't know, could you call it a friendship? Was he a difficult guy to get to know? But could you tell us about how you've been influenced by him?
He taught me everything. I mean, not in a person-to-person individual way, but hearing his work was the greatest lesson for. I wouldn't be making songs without that. I was a comic book artist all my life. I was just a lonely, tortured, guy. I was drawing my sketchbooks all the time and wished that people liked me, and wandered, typical, low on the social pecking order. And my whole goal was to become great at making comics. And when I was introduced to Daniel Johnston's music and became deeper into the world of his recordings, starting in the mid 90s, it showed me a kind of artistic expression that I had never.
Permission not to be polished.
That's part of it, but it's funny because it's like the central focus of my artistic life, and my artistic life is in many ways my life. And I have a hard time talking about it without tearing up, because every time the topic of Daniel Johnston comes up, it's like, it's like, I don't know how Luke Skywalker would talk about Yoda. I'm not even like a big Star Wars fan. I saw the movies as a kid like everybody else, but just by way of analogy, my life is very clearly divided into who I was before Daniel Johnston and who I became in the 25 years after.
Listen up and I'll tell a story about an artist growing old. Some would try for fame and glory, others aren't so bold.
You have something that's good enough. How does it make you feel? When do you know this is something that's so interesting, people definitely will pay attention to this?
Man, it's very hard to know, actually. That is very slippery and sometimes very disappointing. Like a song I wrote a song 2 days ago that blew me away, knocked me out, made me so excited. Because here's the thing, here's the other thing in relation to all this. I've also realized that I'm my own biggest fan. Like, no one's looking forward to the next Jeffrey Lewis comic or song or drawing as much as I am. No, it doesn't make anybody else as excited as it makes me. I don't want to be disappointed by Jeffrey Lewis. He's my favorite artist. He does everything that I want him to do. And sometimes I hear a new Jeffrey Lewis song that I think is phenomenal. And I'm so excited about it. And I make a recording of it. And then when I'm eating dinner, I listen to it again. And I'm like, oh man, I can't wait for people to hear this one. And sometimes I get so excited about it, I start sending it out to certain friends of mine or other artists that I particularly think want to hear it. Certain friends of mine in the artistic world that I've encountered over the years. And once in a while, I'll write a song and be like, man, they are going to love, you know what? I'm going to send this to, to that person. He's going to love this one. And then, when I get a kind of muted response, when somebody doesn't write back, or they don't write back, or they write back in a polite way, rather than saying, I'm completely blown away, that's the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life, then I start to feel like, you know what, maybe I was just in a manic creative state and I got overexcited, and maybe the song isn't really as good as I think it is. You know, usually in normal times, I go to an open mic every week. In normal times, if I'm not on tour, if I'm in New York, I try to go to an open mic once a week and play, and with a new song. And at the open mic, it's mostly people who don't give a damn about whoever the next person coming on stage is. They're all just waiting for their own number to come up to play their own songs. So if I can get up on stage at an open mic and play a new song, and if some stranger in the audience comes up to me afterwards and is like, man, that was really great. Like, who are you? Like, do you have any recordings or anything? Then I'm like, that song really is worth something. Mm-hmm. So that helps. Yeah. Sometimes my bandmates, you know, like my current bandmates, Brent and Mem, I've had a lot of different bandmates over the years, are a good bullshit detector for me.
You were throwing off sparks of pure power, sending signals from a mystery tower. You didn't bother making sure it would sink in. It was a different way of working and thinking. Really wild and completely expressive. So creative and intense and obsessive. You were practically completely beyond it. And you were exactly just what nobody wanted. You were conscious and responsive and present. You weren't trying to make something unpleasant. You were just bouncing off of things that were trashy. And it was never very tricky or flashy.
Or I might start playing a new song and it's some gigs on tour, like on this tour in Europe that we just did in February, March. There were a number of new songs that I was playing on stage that the band didn't know how to play yet, but you know, they were songs that I felt strong enough.
Well, maybe if something you do passes the 24-hour test, do you know what I mean? You wake up the following morning going, it wasn't as good as I thought it was, or that can happen as well.
That can happen.
Sometimes if you write something or do something and you're not sure if you like it or not, that's often a very good sign. It kind of confuses you. They're kind of afraid of it.
Oh yeah.
That's always it's always a positive sign.
That's great. I love that. I love that pushing the needle of transgression just a little bit past the threshold, a little into the red. That's the zone. That's the zone that I really get fired up about, where I'm like, oh, I can't say that. Yes, I'm going to say that. You know, that happens to me that gets me very excited about something.
You obviously seem to work very fast, and your songs are, as I said, humorous, self-depreciating at times, very, very comical. Do you sometimes find it difficult to abandon material as you continue to gig? Is there songs that you love, but you've just got so many that you have to kill some of your babies sometimes?
If Jeffrey Lewis wrote a great song when he was 23 years old, I'm not that Jeffrey Lewis anymore. I'm 44. But that song is part of the overall, is part of my artistic entity, whether in this moment I agree with that or not. So when I do a concert, I want to enter the dimension, the Jeffrey Lewis dimension. And that involves new songs, old songs, and everything needs to be available to me.
Yeah.
I don't like going to a concert where a band only plays their old songs. And I don't like going to a concert where a band only plays their new songs. Mm-hmm. And I don't like going to a concert where a band has a set that they play every night where they're only representing this little aspect of themselves. Yeah. That's boring as hell to me.
I heard a lovely quote from, I think it was Neil Gaiman. Experiences you've had, they're all there on your compost heap, rotting away beautifully. Do you know what I mean? They follow you around and they come out when called upon. Everything you see and do does kind of sit there in the back of your mind, and it percolates, and it could be useful at some time.
Well, that sounds more like the compost of your emotional and personal experiences that you can then kind of pull from to put into new work that you're creating. Yeah. But I'm talking about what you were talking about abandoning old songs versus holding on to old songs, because, you know, Neil Gaiman is not a performer. When you're making comic books or you're writing novels or you're writing songs, you're involved only in the act of creation. You're only moving forward. But when you're a performer, you're on stage not writing a new song. You're on stage writing a set list. That is your creative mission for the night. And that set list is all old material, even if it includes one song that I wrote that afternoon.
I thought Rough Trade would like a little movie to tell their history, just like 24-hour party people did for Factory. So I did some reportage, and I shot this low-budget footage, and I also did one for K Records in case Rough Trade drops me. In 1975, Jeff Travis came from London. He traveled to Canada and the US just for fun. He tried his hand at hitchhiking and found thrift stores to his liking, and shipped home cheapo discs by the ton. When he got back to London, this fellow began a record store near Portobello. He had seen a band he thought was lame, but he borrowed the band's name, and so the Rough Trade store bid the world hello. They sold lots of Jamaican reggae and garage rock and funk, and they thought mainstream music at the time really stunk. And the clientele grew, and before you knew, they were into this new stuff called punk. And the punk spirit said, distribute yourself, 'cause you're able. And Rough Trade also began their own record label. The first single was by Metal Urbane, I've Never Heard of Vain, and then Stiff Little Fingers expanded the stable. There followed the Raincoats, the Swell Mats, the TV Personalities, the Young Marble Giants, the Slits, and Squirty Polity. The Fall said they'd try it, so did Per Ubu and Robert Wyatt, and James Blood Ulmer, the Go-Betweens, and This Heat. And things went on well with other cool, weird stuff like this. And then Travis signed these young dudes called the Smiths. And their success helped things expand, but then it all got out of hand, and the business wound up in the pits. But 10 years later, Rough Trade rose up from the ash, just like a phoenix, and signed the Strokes and made some cash. And now the back catalog is just a memory, and the record store is owned separately, but the legendary indie label is back at last.
What I have to pull from on stage is not my personal experiences in order to create a new work of art. What I have to pull from on stage is my little toolkit arsenal of all the things that Jeffrey Lewis has ever made. And I have a list of all the things. So before I play a show, I look through my list and I try to pick out, that is my artistic contribution to a gig, because the pieces themselves are already old. The pieces already exist. So when I abandon things are any tools that I fashion that don't go in that toolkit. They're not useful to me in the toolkit. I have a lot of songs that don't make it into the toolkit. I'm sitting on right now about 100 songs that nobody has heard from the last few years because they weren't valuable enough to me. Some of them are pretty darn good. In fact, all of them are, fairly decent. And some of them are witty. Some of them are sad. So I have this pile. And when I write a new song, sometimes I don't know if I always get, my hope is that every song I make, I'm hoping this is going to be good enough that I want to play it for people. I want to play it in live gigs. I want to put it on a record.
Yeah.
But just because I wrote it doesn't mean that it's good enough.
You're very hard to define. You definitely have a kind of a punk rock, bluegrassy sort of a style on the guitar. Your finger picking, I think, is very impressive.
I learned a lot from early Donovan records. A lot of my early songs, you can almost match exactly which Donovan song the finger picking pattern came from. What I did start doing a few years, maybe about 6 years ago, I started thinking a lot more about meter in my lyrics. I started putting a lot more focus on beats in the lyrics. And that really came out of the Sonic Youth little books that I was doing, where I was taking Sonic Youth songs and rewriting them as Shakespearean sonnets.
Okay.
And that was just a very fun mental challenge, because here's the work, it's the Sonic Youth original song, whatever song it happens to be, Teenage Riot or whatever. And then here's this extremely rigid form of Old English poetry, where the beat has to be in iambic pentameter. To be or not to be, that is the question. Ba-ba, 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 ba-ba. And it all has to, it's just this one drum beat. Ba-ba, 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 ba-ba. soft, hard, soft, hard, soft, hard, soft, hard. And I was like, how can I, can I rewrite all these Sonic Youth songs to fit into this rhythmic straitjacket? And what that fun little game left me with was this new fun tool in my arsenal, where I never realized how much power you can get out of the meter.
So restrictions can be kind of very liberating.
Oh yeah. Every song in some ways is a straitjacket. Mm-hmm. You're operating under your own self-imposed restrictions. It's only the first line. It's only when you're writing the first lyric that you're free. But then that first lyric becomes the straitjacket that everything else has to. That is the challenge. I mean, it's not free jazz. You're writing in a folk ballad form that operates that way.
Today I went to Major Maps to remaster my old album, and on the L train in the morning I was pretty sure I saw Will Oldham. He was wearing the same sunglasses he had on stage at the Bowery Ballroom. Had he come to walk among the Williamsburgers of his kingdom, and like the burghers of Calais will a sacrifice be demanded, to offer up our dreams and beg for mercy empty-handed, and hapless in our hipness crowded 5 to an apartment, relegate our dreams to hobbies and deny our disappointment, cause the Stones in 65 want total satisfaction, kid. But the Stones in 69 see grace in just getting what you need. But if that's a victory, then I'd hate to see what I'd look like defeated. Cause I know there are those who walk among us who seem to get their dreams unimpeded, like today when I went to Major Maps.
If you listen, what's interesting is like you listen to a song like Stephen Sondheim is not operating in a folk ballad form. A Sondheim song is a completely freewheeling other like approach to songwriting. The melodies and the beats are like, it's like classical composition where they're just open-ended. He might have a rhyme here, but then he might not have another rhyme until somewhere else, and the melody is not repetitive the way a folk and punk and blues song has a repetitive structure.
I'll ask you, how quickly do you write? Because you do manage to get an awful lot of narrative into every line, every word you write adds to the story. It was like Leonard Cohen, he used to spend years sometimes kind of adjusting and tweaking and nudging and the words. Are you more instantaneous? For example, does it just flow out through your pen when you're on a roll? Does it happen quickly for you?
Yeah, I do. I love that Leonard Cohen story about him rewriting Hallelujah, and he's written 80 verses, and he's just sitting in his underwear on the floor, banging his head against the floor because he just can't get it to where he wants it to go. But then on the other hand, you've got Hank Williams, who said, any song that I can't write in 10 minutes or less isn't worth writing.
Yeah, I've heard that before, yeah. Sometimes songs write themselves. You knew they were onto a hit when the song just fell out of the biro in about 3 minutes. Which is
Mark Bolan said the same thing. He was like, I think he said Bang a Gong. I think he said it took him a minute to write the song. The song took less time to write than it does to play. Like, I love that. That's hilarious. I think that's fantastic. I mean, if I can write a song in 5 minutes, that's great. Yeah. Wonderful. Why not? But the only reason I would want anybody to pay attention to me is if I think something is so great, if something makes me so excited that I can't wait to show it to other people. Like, it's like walking on a beach and finding a thing, and I'm like, I gotta show this to people. This is just something.
This song is called The Last Time I Did Acid, I Went Insane. It was a night in July about 15 years ago. Why'd I eat the acid? I don't know. I wasn't thinking and I wasn't scared. Why'd I eat the acid? I wasn't prepared. The last time I did acid, I went insane. And I was hanging out with some friends just getting loaded when all of a sudden my mind exploded. I had a flash that I was gay and I got paranoid. I was sitting on the floor listening to Pink Floyd. The last time I did acid, I went insane. I was drawing crazy pictures, and before I was done, the picture started pulsing like an alien lung, and I said, oh my god, this has just begun. And it was 12 more hours before I was done, and we were up on the rooftop, and I'll tell you the truth, I was convinced I'd already fallen off of the roof. And these weird...
Which is more therapeutic to you? writing songs or coming up with comics? Because they are, as you mentioned, quite autobiographical. Do you get to kind of cleanse the head of noise doing that?
You know, both things cleanse the head because both things require focus. And here's another little metaphor from that I've been thinking of lately. You know, a rat, so they say, has the front teeth of a rat never stop growing. So a rat will die a horrible death where its front teeth grow through its lips and its upper jaw, and it will kill itself with these unless it's chewing on something.
Sure.
And so even when it doesn't need to specifically eat, it has to keep chewing on something. That's why if you have a pet hamster, you got to put like cardboard in the tank, because even if it's not a digestible carrot or a piece of broccoli, they just got to chew. Otherwise, every moment that they're not chewing, they're heading towards death.
Yeah.
And I've come to realize that that's how the human mind works. The mind just goes like a rat's teeth growing. You're going to think. Your mind thinks. There is no mind without thinking. And my mind, I don't know how this operates for other people, but my mind will kill itself if it's not focused on something, because for some stupid reason, I don't know why, the default position of my thoughts is subject to gravity. If I'm not working on something or distracted by something, my thoughts just get darker and darker and darker. It's as though they're affected by gravity. And I get myself into a really miserable place, whether it's a specific anxiety, something that I'm afraid of, or just the general meaninglessness or darkness or, you know, moral condition of the world, whatever it is. Like if left to its own devices, the rat's teeth of my conscious thought will grow until they kill me.
Lots of people from the outside looking in would, in some way, be envious of your ballsy approach to life. You travel a lot. You've kind of done what you wanted to do. And I've even heard other artists and musicians you've been mentioned saying, yeah, it's fucking mad what he does. He'll go to a gig, he'll put up his hand and say, anyone here have a floor we can crash on tonight? It's very by the seat of your pants approach to touring and life in general. It's quite
humiliations. So you hit the open road and ate a lot of crazy gravel. With good songs and decent merch, you always found a way to travel. But you find that booking tours can be more trouble than it's worth. Who'd see your unknown band when there's 10 million on the earth?
Well, to some degree, that comes from Daniel Johnston. Not that he was a touring artist, but like you alluded to earlier, one of the lessons from Daniel is that you don't wait for somebody else's permission. You just do it. It doesn't matter what resources you have. It doesn't matter, you know, nothing matters. You just do it. You make the song, you make the recording, you copy the tape of the recording, you draw an album cover for it, you give it to people, you sell it to people, you play an open mic, you play a gig if somebody asks you to play a gig. You don't wait if you're waiting for somebody else to make one of those things happen, that, you know, so that's part of it, but that's not the main Daniel Johnston thing for me. Is like the connection to the human soul and the human experience, but that's another topic. But what you're talking about, you know, people often say to me, well, not often, but if it comes up, people are like, oh, man, Jeffrey, you're really, you know, tell me how to make it in the music business, or, you know, you're really living the dream, man. I always wanted to be a professional musician. But it's not, I really don't see it like this is not my dream. My dream was to become a comic book artist, and I failed at that dream. I'm 44 and I'm not a professional comic artist. I don't have the skills to be a professional, and I don't have the fan base in my comics. So that was what I chose. When I was young, I decided I'm gonna become a great comic book artist.
Yeah.
And I'm not. I'm just hustling, you know, just the same way somebody else might be like, I want to be a drummer in a rock and roll band, but, you know, I have to be a teacher. You know, I'm teaching at this university because I never fulfilled my dream of being a drummer. But it's okay because I still play drums in the garage on weekends, and I have my band, and this is a good life.
Sure, yeah.
That's the same as me. It's the same as me. I chose a path to be a great comic artist, and I didn't make it all the way up that hill. I made it to a certain extent, and I'm still working on it. But if I was going to be a professional comic artist, it would have happened by the time I was 22, 25, 27. But instead, I got a day job, and my day job was making music. You know, that was not my dream. It was just like water flowing downhill, taking the path of least resistance.
I recently just watched the Spike Jones Beastie Boys documentary, which I loved.
I've not seen that, but I would like to see that.
Oh, it's fantastic. But from New York City, they all lived in New York City all their lives. I'd like to know a little bit about, like, for example, were your folks supportive of your endeavors? Because they were obviously New York City living as well. How did that shape your outlook and your experiences?
There's so many different ways I could approach this question, but you know, my parents are not. I would say they're perhaps bemused by my music career, especially my dad, who, you know, he's fairly narrow-minded about his musical tastes. He likes the blues, and he likes some jazz and maybe a little folk, but mostly, I would say a lot of white bohemians in the 60s caught that affliction. Why are these white hippies from the 60s obsessed with the idea of the blues as the uber form of artistic expression? To me, it's really uncreative. I mean, I love some great blues as much as anybody else, but it's a way to avoid creativity, if in some ways. But my dad is a very good blues acoustic finger-picking guitarist. Very good. He's not a good singer, but he can pick up an acoustic guitar and play like a Mississippi John Hurt style country blues to a very high degree of ability. So that's an important building block influence. And my mother always played folk songs. There was always a guitar in the house and sometimes a piano in the house. And my mom and my dad would both play a bit of folk and blues on the piano. So there was that. But they have a bohemian moral outlook and a financial outlook that is probably maybe one of the biggest bedrock foundational elements of what I do, because we had, you know, next to nothing growing up. I mean, I never thought of it that way as a kid, but New York City at that time and the neighborhood that we were in, that was where you went if you had no money. And they didn't have no money because they were, my dad just wasn't interested in working. Like, you know, it was like one of those hippies who was like, why work? You know, so we live in a shitty little apartment on the Lower East Side. And, you know, we hang out with our funky friends who live on the block. I mean, we drink beers on the corner and, you know, once in a while I'll do some work to make a little money. I'll help somebody move their couch and maybe they'll give me $20 for that, you know? So it was like an attitude towards money and survival that was really different from a mainstream capitalist, go get 'em, gotta make lots of money attitude. It was an attitude of really appreciating what you had, and that what you had might be very simple, but it was really enough. You know, if we had, you know, you have something to eat for breakfast, you have something to eat for dinner, you got some paper to draw on. Yeah, although my father, and my mother to some degree, but especially my father, really also had that hippie bohemian travel. Travel was really prioritized. He was always traveling on his motorcycle, always traveling in his cars, you know, taking a road trip, going to the West Coast, going down south, going up north, doing it with almost no money because you knew how to fix your own car and you could live on a couple of cans of beans. But that was always a big part of my impression of what life was all about. The whole point was that you could travel
cheaply.
Yeah, and cheap.
Yeah.
So that what my point is that all of that is more of a foundation to my musical and my artistic existence. my expectations for how much money I would need to consider that I made it, you know, a lot of other people would have had my music and art career for a few years and would have given up because they'd be like, oh, this is a failure. I'm barely making any money. But to me, the tiny bits that I was making, I was like, this is incredible. You know, my expectation, you know, okay, so we're on tour and we don't have any place to sleep, so we got to sleep in the car. So what? I was doing that all my life anyway. You know, like my baseline expectation for what counted as success or failure was, I think, radically different than what a lot of other bands were. And that just allowed me to go forward with a very glad heart. From that gladness on the very simple level is something that I grew up with, and I think really helped me end up where I am.
So, Jeffrey, on that note, I'm going to let you back to your work. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me, and hopefully chat to you again sometime in the future.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for the call.
Behind the eyes and ears are little throats, gagging on all unfamiliar notes, choking off all inorganic bits. Boxes are the size of what it fits.